Oh, there we are. Okay. Hello, everybody. And I hope everyone is doing well. This is Michael Voss, Dragon of the Southern Tier, and I'm happy to be here with you today. Our system is just a little bit off. This is what happens after being gone for about 2 weeks. And for some reason, it sounds like I got a little static in the background. Can somebody let me know? Are you hearing static on your side, folks? Because it sounds like we're getting a little bit of feedback here. I'm not exactly sure where that's coming from. We will try and fix that as we go. It is good to be back on YouTube. It is good to be back on our live stream every week at Sunday, 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, speaking to you, because you are the most important thing, because it is about free speech. It is about, thank you, Jason, for letting me know about that. It's all about free speech here, because you have that right. No matter where you find yourself in the world, you are entitled to free speech. Many governments don't believe that, but I do, and it is an intrinsic, inalienable right. And even when YouTube and the other internet overlords try to stop us, we believe that we have to speak up for you and for everyone to let you know your voice matters. And we will not be afraid. There is no fear here. And it is good to see you as well, Hot Chicks. We thank you for joining us today. So we have a lot of things that we're going to cover. It's been a week since YouTube attacked us and stopped us from being able to speak to you about the issues that are going on. And there are a lot of issues out there. There are a lot of problems. Mike Bowie mentions that Sky News Australia is suspended by YouTube. There's been a lot of companies. D, let me know. Is the volume a little bit better now? Can you hear that better? Again, the system is a little bit crazy for me. And so I'm trying to make sure everything is back up and running for you. And I know there's been a lot of people. Sky News has been attacked. There was Dave Rubin that was attacked. There's been a lot of people who've been shut down. And we know that the Biden administration has been working with Facebook, with the internet overlords, to make sure that you don't have a voice, that you are silenced. And this is something that is the example for the rest of the world. America is the shining beacon of freedom and democracy around the world. And if our government is silencing the average person, then they are doing that to everyone else. D mentions no volume, no static, but the volume is high, and I don't know why. Is anyone else having that problem? My volume is up pretty high at the moment on my side, and it should be coming across loud and clear. So I'm not sure why that's the case, D. But if anyone else is having that problem, please let me know, and I'll try and fix the system on our side. Again, we are back with you, and I don't know if that's just a YouTube thing, if it's a Facebook thing, if it's DLive, because the internet overlords, after having us down for a week, have no real love for us. So they may be messing with the system in ways that I can't tell. And I know a lot of people say, well, Mike, that's just you. You're just saying that, it's not real. And I want people to know, yes, it should be better when the mic is closer to me. But people should know that this isn't just one person. This isn't just about me. This is really about you. They're not coming after me. They're coming after you. What they're doing is they're trying to silence you. I'm one of the examples. I'm one of the people they're trying to just silence as an example to make you be afraid to be able to speak from wherever the world you are. They don't want people to speak up in the UK, in Germany, in Canada, in India, Peru. We are watched in about 100 countries out of 164 countries around the world. And it's because there is conversation. It's because we speak to you. We reach out, and just as you're saying with D, Hot Chicks, Jason, Michael, we're able to say, we want to hear your voice, and we want you to comment on the issues of the day. And we are going to do exactly that, because we are not afraid. And we want you to see through our example that even if they were to delete this channel, which they are likely to do, we are not going to give up on you. we're going to continue every day. Hot Chicks mentions that, would they rather have me? You know what, Hot Chicks? It would be interesting to listen to you. But you know what? They want you to be afraid. And we want you to know. We want to see your comments, your tweets, your chats. We want to hear your phone calls at 607-242-1582, because this is the way that we keep our free speech. This is the way that we are able to communicate to our elected leaders, reminding them that they have an obligation and a responsibility to us. They serve us, not the other way around. They are not neo-nobles, and even the internet overlords, they do not get the chance to be able to tell us what we can and cannot speak about. They want to talk about misinformation. They don't have a right to do that. Disinformation, misinformation, that's not their job. Because, and a matter of fact, it's not even in Article 230. That is the job of an editor. And they are not editors by their own words. Therefore, they're a platform, which means they don't get to tell us what they think is right or wrong. And we see this happening all over the place, because it's not just something that's been happening with us. This is Dave Rubin. I want you to hear what Dave Rubin had to say about his experience recently with the internet overlords.
And then, you're not going to believe it, pull up the image. I got this email from the Twitter people, and I'll read it for you. Hello, we have restored your account, and we apologize for any inconvenience this may have caused. Twitter takes reports of violations of the Twitter rules very seriously. After reviewing your account, it looks like we made an error. Thanks, Twitter support. Wait a minute. Let me get that other piece of paper here. Before, can we put up the original thing that they said that I did? That was misinformation. I could have been killing people. But then, can we get the apology again? Well, gosh darn it, it looks like they made an error. And not
See, and that's one of the examples right there. That, no problem. Please, thank you for sharing this, Dee. We really appreciate that. But this is one of the examples. This is what's going on in America and around the world right now. We have these internet overlords. They're going out there, like they did to Dave Rubin. Oh, we're going to silence you. We don't like that you're quoting major news media and that you're discussing the issues that are affecting everyone. These are facts that we have presented to you, and they don't like that. They don't want, because they don't want you to discuss anything, but they want you to be silent and subservient. And that's why they sent out to Dave Rubin, said, hey, we're going to shut you down. You're on suspension. And then they send back a note. Oh, we're sorry. Everything you said was absolutely true. All of the media sources you quoted, that's all true. You know what? We got suspended on July 23rd because we quoted the Hawaii Tribune. We quoted the AP News and Reuters because we were talking to you and telling you what is in the news. Not what was being promoted by the news, but what actually was in the news. And they said, no, the public can't hear that. The public can't learn and think for themselves. Do not do that. That's got to be insulting. That's insulting and aggravating. And it's terrifying that we're seeing this come from the news, as you see it. And we're just one source. Yes, it's happening to Dave Rubin. It's happening to Steven Crowder. And they are trying to put fear into any news media that is not approved for telling you something that you might learn about. That where you could learn any information that would make you say, gee, what's happening in my country? I'll give you another example. This is from the Epic Times. I want you to hear what they had to say. And well, listen to this yourself.
However, due to the censorship on YouTube, where we publish these episodes, I just don't believe it's prudent to go through them right now, because even though my episodes, as I'm sure you're aware, are grounded in facts, even though I source every statement and I try to give both sides of an issue, it frankly doesn't matter. Because the YouTube algorithm, it picks up on certain words, and then some latte-drinking 20-year-old kid in Silicon Valley, he or she makes the determination as to whether you have the right to watch my video or not on their platform. However, if you...
See, he says it right there. And so I want you to understand, this is not just something that's happening to a small channel. It's happening to bigger channels. These are multi-million-dollar channels. These are individuals who are making hundreds of thousands of dollars. And you know what they're doing? They're trying to silence you. Hot Chicks mentions they interrupt your business only to tell you it was an error. That's right. It's your fault. It's your fault from listening to the news, for having a voice and having an opinion. And we have to make that very clear, because this censorship, it's not really targeting me. It's targeting you. They are trying to silence you. They have news. The Epic News is a recognized major news media. Dave Rubin is a recognized political commentator. And they get rid of these people, and they're throwing them under a bus. They don't want you to hear about this. They don't want you to speak. And by the way, it's not like they silenced us completely, because you can go to Rumble and you would have seen our tweet on Friday, our brief article on Friday when we were talking about several issues. In fact, one of the things we were talking about, question on July 29th. And we think you should be able to speak about this, that you should have a voice in this.
Do you need an ID in Texas to buy cigarettes?
You can't buy them unless you're at least 21.
But do you have to show an ID to buy cigarettes?
You have to show an ID.
Do you need an ID when you're getting a job and trying to get on payroll in Texas?
Yes.
Do you need an ID to get Social Security services in Texas?
You do.
Do you have to show an ID when you fly in a private charter jet?
Yes.
I wouldn't know. I've never flown on one. What percentage of blacks in Texas, black and brown and African Americans, are registered to vote?
Oh, a huge percentage.
70%. Do you know what percentage of African Americans, black and brown Texans have voted on average or in the last election?
About 64%.
Correct. Do you know how many whites are registered to vote in Texas?
Far more than African Americans.
72%. You have 70% of blacks in Texas who are registered to vote. You have 72% of whites in Texas who are registered to vote. Do you know the percentage of whites who turned out to vote in recent elections?
I want to say over 50-some%.
65%. Yeah. Do you know what percentage of Hispanics are registered to vote in Texas?
No, I do not.
63%. Do you know what percentage of Hispanics voted in the last election?
I think it was over 40%.
53%. Do you know the number or percentage of Democrats who support voter ID in this country?
I do not, but I don't think it's a whole lot.
72%. Do you know the number of black and brown and African Americans in this country who support voter ID?
No.
75%. Do you know where the state of Texas is ranked with black voter turnout in this country?
With black voters turnout? Mm-hmm.
Do you know where Texas is ranked?
Oh, about 44%.
The latest numbers that I read this morning was that Texas is ranked 10th.
Did you hear Representative Okay, so that's to make, hey, it's good to see you back, D. So I want you to see something. When we just showed you that, that's one of the things that YouTube and the internet overlords don't want you to be discussing. How many people noticed that Representative Mace, and then followed by Representative Chip Roy out of Texas, that they actually were speaking to the Texas Democrats who ran away from Texas, ran away from their job, went on vacation, and decided to hang out in Washington, D.C., where other Democrats lauded them as if they were heroes for not doing their job, for being cowardly, and they were then asked questions. And here it is, we see these representatives, what are they pushing? Oh, well, no, blacks they're not able to vote. Well, that's not true. Oh, IDs, that's a horrible thing. That's terrible. It's evil. It's stopping people from being able to vote, to be able to have an ID. Oh, well, here's all the things that people have IDs for already. Black people have IDs to do all of these things, these regular, everyday things that everyone is doing in this nation. And every time that someone is studying that and looking at that, we find out that, oh, wait a minute, black people already have IDs. It's not a problem. It's not preventing voter registration. You know what? And the internet overlords, they didn't want me to have this conversation with you. They didn't want you to see what was happening in our Congress. They didn't want you to have that conversation. They wanted you to be just as misinformed as the Texas Democratic representatives, the state representatives, who are at the Congress in a hearing when they should have been arrested, and they didn't even know what their numbers are. What are the true facts of what is the reality? They had their impression which has been spread around by a lot of progressives trying to say, oh, well, blacks are being suppressed. They're under, every single one of the numbers was above what they expected. They thought that blacks were underrepresented. Oh, look, they aren't. The facts don't match up to the story that's being told to you, the feelings that they want you to have. Even the representatives that were elected are misinforming the public, but that's okay. Because YouTube, Facebook, they like that message. They like that message. Texas is number 10 out of 50 states, in the top one-fifth of the nation in having black voter turnout. And they didn't even know that. It's their own state. And you know what? YouTube doesn't want you to have that conversation. They don't want you to respond like Hot Chicks mentions that, yeah, she thought that it was 40%. Oh my God, no, there's nothing. Oh, these numbers are crazy. It's out of whack. No, it's a lie. That's their feelings. It's not the truth. To go back to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez when she was speaking on 60 Minutes, the Texas Democrats are there telling you what they feel. And meanwhile, the factual, empirical, actual truth is nothing like what they're trying to let you feel. And this is something that YouTube, that Facebook, that the internet overlords, Twitter, they do not want you to engage in this. They do not want you to have this conversation. They do not want live streams like you're seeing right now, where people are able to make comments and to call into the show and say, my God, this is embarrassing that we have individuals who are elected to an office who have a political agenda and have no idea what the truth is, that they are spreading this misinformation saying, oh my God, blacks can't vote. It's so racist. And they are absolutely wrong based on the numbers themselves. The reality of how people are actually voting is saying, no, that's not true. It's not real. They made this up. So it's very interesting to see that when you get to see the reality versus the feeling that socialists and democratic socialists and progressives want you to feel. They want you to feel oppressed, but the reality is you aren't. They want you to feel like you don't have enough freedom unless you do what they say, when the reality is you have all the freedom, you have all the rights. They already exist. But they want you to be subservient, to listen to them, to do what they say, because they're telling you, oh, no, you're just in a bad place. You don't know. Exactly, that's not true, not even close to true. And see, this is why you see that we were suspended on July 23rd from YouTube, because they didn't want us to have this conversation with you. And it's not like you can't respond, as Dee is responding, as Hot Chicks, that Mike, Jason. You can type in a comment just like they are. You can call into the show at 607-242-1582, and you can tell me if you think I'm wrong. If you think that this is somehow misunderstood, that the information we are providing to you from Congress, from the left-leaning news sources, if you think that we're wrong, you can tell us that, and you can explain why we're wrong. See, that's what freedom is about, where we get to have a conversation. We get to learn from each other. We get to understand and get context and nuance and understand the consequences of what's happening. Because just like the Texas Democrats there, when you stop going by what you think you know, what the headline may have been in promoted in the major news media that is misinforming you, and when you find out the facts, you have a different impression. Because I think anyone who thinks that Texas is somehow suppressing the black vote and then finds out that it is exactly the same as the white vote and that black voters are not being suppressed at all, you have a suddenly very different way of looking at the information that is being given to you. Because then you're being deceived. You see that you are being deceived. And I'm not telling people who to vote for, because I know YouTube is watching this right now, and they're going to try to say, oh my God, you're misinforming. You're trying to stop people from voting. I never said that. What I am saying is people are voting, whether they're black, white, or Hispanic. They are actively voting, and they are registered to vote. And what you are being told by Democrats, progressives, is misinformation because they are underreporting the truth. And that is something that we saw in Congress from Representative Mace and also Representative Chip Roy. But they don't care, because oh, we don't like what you're saying, Mike, so we have to suspend you, which is what they did to me. Because I showed you the truth. And by the way, after the show is done, you will see links to everything that we are discussing so that you can watch it for yourself and you can come to your own conclusion. Hello, Greg. It's good to see you here. Greg mentions the Delta variant is in retreat in the UK, and we can learn from other countries and other people. And I do want to get into the Delta variant. I do want to address that in a moment, but I want to make sure people are very clear what's going on here. And this is key information. Let me go to, this is on Reuters. I don't know how many people may have seen this. And in general, in the United States, very few people. The Philadelphia election officials rejected forensic audit requests. Now, I'm not able to mention Arizona and mention what Philadelphia is doing in the same breath, because that will get me, the YouTube will come in and they will not only delete this, they will stop this live stream. They will cut us off. So rather than do that, I want you to understand, this is reported by Reuters, and it doesn't matter that I'm quoting major international news sources. YouTube has already said they don't care. They don't want you to talk about this, but we don't have fear. And so I'm going to talk about this as best as I can. And what Philadelphia was noting here, I want you to understand, and this is coming from reporters Nathan Lane, July 30th at 2 p.m. from Reuters. And the key thing to take away from this whole thing is that the Pennsylvania state agency in charge of elections has warned all counties that it would decertify their equipment if it was handed over to an unauthorized third party. A punishment already meted out to Fulton County, which participated in an audit orchestrated by Mastriano last year. The key thing I've highlighted here is a punishment. The Reuters news service has identified that 8 individuals in Pennsylvania's state government are punishing the states and the counties for trying to provide an audit to let people know what's going on. This is the same thing that was being mentioned by Epic News, and they can't go into detail on it, neither can I. But notice, this is what's the reality. And this is insane. Now, this is also in Milwaukee. Milwaukee reporting on the, and this is from July 30th as well. Speaker Robin Vos expands into investigation into Wisconsin 2020 election after 2 investigators quit. Well, there's a lot of reasons for that. And I want you to see this, okay? Because what they're talking about here is the same thing that Philadelphia is talking about. They want to just look into this. And we are hearing Democrats over and over and over again say, you can't look at that. It's not real. It's not true. You can't talk about this. Well, wait a minute. If it's all so above board, and if there is no question, why can't we do an audit? Why can't we look at this? And why is it that we are seeing counties punish people? We are seeing state legislatures punish people for even suggesting that we should look at something that's happened and say how we can improve it. Because in 2005, it was June 6th of 2005, Nancy Pelosi in front of Congress, as we have shown on this show before, was standing there talking about the Ohio election of 2005 and talking about, well, we have to do an audit and we have to make sure that the integrity of elections is upheld, because she had a problem with it and she didn't want to count that. And if you don't believe me, YouTube fact checkers, go back to Congress, C-SPAN 2005, and you will be able to see that. See, and there's nothing wrong with this. And Greg is right, trust but verify. Absolutely not. And yes, I am trying to word around this very carefully, because YouTube will shut this down. They will strike this channel and they will delete us and stop us from being able to speak to you because they are terrified. By the way, John also is with us. Hello, John. And he says, just joining now. I'm late due to reading all of, I'm not Starfire. It's worse than you thought. I know. I've read the reviews on that. And again, it's another way of trying to instill into the public, Here's what you should be feeling. Here's what you should think. And they're attacking the youngest of us. They're going after our youth. Although I'm not Starfire, who knows what audience they're trying to get there. But these are the things they don't want you to talk about. You know, YouTube wants you to think, Facebook, internet overlords want you to think that there's nobody with a question. No one has a question about any election ever happening in the United States. That's not true. And the question isn't whether can people vote or not, because as we can see in Texas, while the progressives have this idea, they have this feeling in their heads, when you actually look at the evidence, that's not true. People are voting, they are not suppressed, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with going back and saying, hey, let's take a look at what happened. I'm not telling you to change anything. I have not said that. What I am saying is there's nothing wrong with looking at an election like Nancy Pelosi said in 2005, like Bernie Sanders said in 2005, and to review what happened, to maybe make our systems better for whomever may win. I have yet to say anyone did or did not win. We have never said that on this channel, and YouTube will strike us, even though we have not said that. All we're doing is quoting that there is Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Arizona, Georgia, many states are looking at the system. In fact, 16 states are looking at this right now and saying, how do we make the system better? How do we make it more fair and more representative? How can we give voters confidence again? Because voters don't have confidence. And instead, what we're seeing, yes, hot chicks, is oppression. But here it is. As we got mentioned back on our Twitter feed, we were notified from Jason that there's a case going on here. Kyle Becker mentioned it. Kyle Becker brought up the fact that 65,000 Americans are part of a class action lawsuit that is being put forth because it is the internet overlords that are denying the American people the ability to speak. They are denying our First Amendment right, and they are even influencing, as we showed you, even the news media is being subjected to this. That is against the First Amendment. We are seeing our news media being chilled and not able to speak to you. And yes, we are part of that news media. We're in the top 100,000 news media channels on YouTube right now. And that's because you subscribe. And it is incredibly important. I hope this is making it clear. We are not afraid to talk about the issues that are important to you and to hear your voice about what you think about it. And it's only possible when you subscribe, when you like, when you share. And yes, I did notice that the other news media, they're not going to promote this. This is not going to be something that you're going to be easily able to find. It's shadow banning. Not only are they suspending us, they're making it hard people to find this. And that's because as we have more and more people who like us, who comment, who subscribe, it reaches, because of their algorithms, it reaches more people because they are afraid. They do not want these conversations. And again, I will say to you, if you think I am wrong, if you think Reuters is incorrect, if you think that when we're speaking about the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, that they are incorrect, if you think the blue check Kyle Becker, who's on Twitter, if you think they're incorrect, then please, I want you to, these are the articles. If you think that we are misrepresenting it, if you think Epic Times, if you think Dave Rubin, if you think these news media sources that are confirmed sources and they're confirmed by the left, well then, please let me know. Claudia, it's good to see you. Claudia says, the question becomes, why do they think poor people don't even have ID, even to get social services that you need? Well, Representative Mace, in Congress, speaking to the Texas representatives, did ask, do you need an ID to get social services? The answer is yes. If you're in New York State, if you go into DSS and you ask them for help to pay your rent, to pay your electricity, they will ask you for an ID. And if you do not have an ID, they will provide you an ID because you have to be able to have an ID. They have to recognize you. Now, I know that Joe Biden back in April said, well, black people don't know, excuse me, it was February of 2021. He said black people just don't know how to get ID. They don't know how to go online. Yes, Joe Biden did say these things at a CNN town hall. But that's their feeling. That's the feelings that we get from these socialists, from these progressives. It's not the reality. Over and over again, they keep saying poor people don't have the same capacity, that you are inferior because you are poor. Because if you're poor, well, then you must be dumb and you must be somehow very often. What did Joe Biden say back in 2020? That black kids are just as good as white kids. Remember that line? And I believe that was exactly how he said it. It's insane. And that's what Biden said. Thank you, Jason. And that's the thing. It is the racism of the left that we hear constantly. And it's okay for them to say, well, you are inferior because you're not like them. Because they are elite and smart and they know the best thing. And well, you're just common folk. You're a peasant. And they are neo-nobles, and they're smarter, and they know how you should live your life. And that should make you upset, especially when they silence you, when you dare say, hey, logic dictates that if 65,000 people are being silenced, if we see the news media being chilled, being threatened, because they're daring to say, hey, here's a fact. Let's ask a question about that fact. What are the consequences of that fact? If that's being chilled, gee, we should be concerned. Because that's the First Amendment. That's one of the cornerstones of our nation. In fact, it is the first cornerstone of our nation, according to the amendments, and therefore we should be upset. As Claudia says, why do they think this? No one has been willing to ask, and I wish someone had asked any of the representatives down in Texas, why do you think that people aren't able to register when 75% of blacks are registered and that we see 64% of blacks are voting? And that is right in line with whites. 65% of whites in Texas are voting. 64% of blacks are voting. Why do you think that blacks are not registered and that they're not voting when they are right in line with whites? Why do you think this is somehow racist when they are almost exactly the same numbers? That there is no misrepresentation. There is no disrepresentation. Why can't we ask that question? Why do the internet overlords get upset when that question is asked? And when we say, and when we see that our representatives in various states are saying to make the public comfortable, to reignite their confidence in our government and our election system, we are going to count some of the numbers and not saying that anything's changing, but to give you confidence, yes, these are the numbers. And we see only the left are the ones who are saying, don't count. You don't need to count. Please don't count. And the internet is saying, oh my God, you can't count. Don't count anything. Just accept it because we're the government. We said so. And really, when has the government ever gotten anything right? Why should we blind faith accept everything that the government said? I don't remember the left saying we should have blind faith in the government when President Bush said we had to go over to Afghanistan. I didn't see them have blind faith when they heard President Trump say we have to lower taxes so that the American people will be able to keep more of their money because that's good for the economy. I didn't hear them with blind faith on these things. Matter of fact, if I remember correctly, when President Trump said we will have a vaccine by the end of 2020, I remember and if YouTube would like me to, I can go to the major news media sources that quote Democrats, including Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, and Governor Cuomo, as they said they had no faith in that whatsoever. In fact, we can go back to Kamala Harris, who said that she has serious doubts about anything that would be rushed through. That was in 2020. Today, They are all about those vaccines, and they want everyone to get them, and they're even offering money to convince people they have to take those vaccines, which I'm going to get into in a minute. But do you notice the difference there? There is no blind faith from the left and the right in government, because government doesn't deserve blind faith. That's why we have checks and balances in our system, and the power of the government lies in you. That's what the 9th and 10th Amendments are all about. You have all the power of this government until you give it to the government. And somehow the internet overlords and Democrats, the progressives and democratic socialists, don't want you to recognize that. They want you just to accept, do what we said, or else. This is a threat. And it is a threat not just against my channel, it's against you. Greg mentions that they never are bringing up the truth that we are talking about here. Claudia mentioned that to put your kids into school, you need ID. That is a fact. You need ID to have a bank account, as was just mentioned by Representative Mace, to get an apartment, to get a job. But somehow they want you to think you can't have ID. It's something that's beyond you. How many times have you heard that? I'm asking you guys. You tell me, how many times have you seen on the internet, have you seen memes, you've seen quotes from the major news media saying, well, if you're black, you're poor, you can't get an ID. Meanwhile, we already have IDs. Whether you're poor or black doesn't matter. You already have an ID because you couldn't get a job without it. You couldn't get social services without it. In fact, the only people who really don't have IDs in this nation are illegal aliens, not immigrants, because they weren't invited into America. They weren't authorized to be in America. They are illegally in America, and they are alien to this nation. They are illegal aliens. That is the legal term for them. And anytime someone uses another term besides illegal alien, they are trying to mislead you. They are trying to do exactly what we saw with the Texas Democrats, as I just showed you, where they are trying to give you the feeling and hide the fact. The fact is they are illegal aliens, and they're the only people who don't have ID. They're the only people who have to worry about it. And guess what? They shouldn't have ID because they are illegal. Now, if you disagree with me, I'm all ears. Please type in the message, call into the show, 607-242-1582, and I'm willing to hear your argument to tell me why illegal aliens deserve to have IDs, even though they have broken federal law and many of the local and state laws by being in this country in the first place. Getting a job is also illegal for them. So that's another crime that they're doing. Evading the police and prosecution of their crimes is yet another crime that they do. They are illegal aliens and they are criminals, every single one. You may not like that. You may not feel that that's justified. That is the law, period. And the internet overlords may not like me saying this, but that is a fact. We can go through the federal statutes. There are several of them, and it is a fact. So let me go back to some of the comments here, because this is important, because this is a conversation with you. And it's very much how they want to define things. Jason mentions it's how they are defining us, because if you remember Biden's great statement, if you ain't voting for him, then you ain't black. Well, sorry, I didn't vote for you, and I am black, and I am Hispanic, and millions of people did. And he didn't get 80% of the black vote. He didn't get the traditional 80% that we see in every election. And that's because people are saying, you're a racist, for one, just like Kamala Harris said to him. And two, the man is out of his mind. Hot Chicks mentions that they get upset because you have a vested interest in the outcomes of elections. Well, I have a vested interest in everyone being confident. See, I believe, and this is important, more people will go out and vote if they believe their vote counts and that it has an impact. See, you only hear from the left. It's the only people that I've ever heard who have said your vote doesn't matter is someone who's been told that from the left. The left likes to say that. They say your vote doesn't matter and that you can't vote and that you have a problem voting. Meanwhile, I hear from Republicans and the right all the time, go out and vote. We know you have an ID. Show your ID. Please vote. We want you to vote. We want you to be involved in the process. Know what you're voting for and vote for it. I believe in that absolutely. I've never, ever told anyone not to do that. In fact, go back on this channel for 10 years. You will never find a single video where I have ever told people, don't go out and vote. You will never find that. Please, I dare someone. Media Matters, everyone, go and search for it. There has never been a time in 1,200 plus videos that I have done, you've never heard me say, don't go and vote. Not once. In fact, we've told you, go out and vote. More importantly, know what you're voting for. That you will see over and over again. But that's not the same thing that they're telling you. The left, the progressives, the socialists are telling you your vote doesn't matter. And they have to, and because they don't think your vote matters, because they don't think that you're voting the right way, they have to fix the system so that they can make sure they're going to get the result they want. That doesn't empower people to go out and vote. That doesn't encourage people to go out and vote. It makes people not trust the government or the elections. And that is the problem. And that's something that we have to countermand. Hot Chicks mentions that in the end, the internet overlords are being vanquished by their own hands and their own hypocrisy. Well, people do notice it, but more people are afraid to make a comment. They're more afraid to even see it. And they're being shadow banned. This channel, Dave Rubin, Epoch Times, the evidence is out there. 65,000 people part of a lawsuit that is being put on. There is a reason why they exist. We've seen how many times has Twitter, as an example, gone in front of Congress, whether the Senate or the House, and stated, oops, we had a bad algorithm. 600,000 people were being shadow banned, including members of Congress. That was from 2018, by the way. How many times have they had that conversation? How many times has Facebook and Google had to show up in front of Congress and go, yeah, well, we are suppressing certain people based on what they are or are not saying, based on what we think about that. How many times has that happened? I can tell you that on this channel, we've covered it at least 5 different times over as many years where they have been in front of Congress and admitted this. The problem isn't the people. The problem is the internet overlords and certain socialists and progressive organizations that want to convince people you don't matter. And that is the problem. It's not IDs. It's these overlords telling you you don't matter. And that is the ultimate problem, I believe. If you think I'm wrong, I'm more than happy to hear that comment. I'm more than happy to take that phone call, 607-242-1582. Let me get back to some of the comments here. Greg mentions, and I'm going to catch up to the comments, folks. Everybody has IDs. Dems don't want them to use them to vote because it reduces voter problems. Again, I got to be somewhat careful with the words because I know they're going to hit me again. They're going to give me another strike for 2 weeks and try and delete this channel. And I may have already gone too far. They may do that already, but we're going to find out. Hot Chicks mentions the internet overlords are the internet overlords are revealed as aliens. That's funny, Hot Chicks. Greg mentions how can illegal aliens get a job or an ID without a social security number? Greg, I wish I could answer that for you, but in New York State, under Governor Cuomo, it is possible they can get IDs. Even though it is illegal for an illegal alien to be able to drive a car and to get insurance and to go to work, it is a fact that the New York State Legislature, which is controlled by, on the Assembly, by Democrats, and by the Senate, which is controlled by Democrats, and Governor Cuomo, controlled by him, that they did in fact authorize illegal aliens to get state-issued IDs, so that, and the reasoning was for them to be able to go to and from work. Now, they're not allowed to federally get a job, and yet New York State has provided them with identification to allow them to more easily get a job and to pay for insurance that they are not by law allowed to do. So the only way that this can happen is you see states and cities that are breaking the law, that are becoming sanctuary cities, sanctuary states, violating the law, picking and choosing which laws they wish to enforce or to even acknowledge. And that's the only way it can happen. And that's a problem. Because if you're teaching people who just came into this nation, these people who are coming into our nation in the millions, and if you're telling them, well, we as Americans, as the government, we pick and choose which laws actually apply, what do you think they're going to do? If that's what they're being taught, if that's what they're being shown, that they will pick and choose laws, that we will give them $15,000, which New York State did, or $600, which California did, for being illegal in our country, then, and that was as part of the, just like people got a stimulus, that was the stimulus for illegal aliens. In California, it was $600. In New York State, it was $15,000, approved by the New York State government as it was run by Democrats. They pushed this through, and they're giving these checks to people we don't even know who they are. Because again, like Greg mentioned, they don't have IDs. We have no way of verifying who they are. They didn't come here with any identification or approval. So we're just giving money away to who knows who for committing a crime. We are rewarding crimes. That is a fact. And if YouTube or any other internet source would like to question that, please, we will be happy to go back to the New York Times, the New York Post, the Washington Post, the Washington Examiner, and show you the evidence where New York State did pass, I believe it was called the Green Light Law, where they did give IDs to illegal aliens so that they could be able to drive to and from a job they can't have. And we can go to those very same sources and show you where New York State, under Governor Cuomo, authorized $15,000 to illegal aliens. It's not even a question. This is terrifying stuff, folks. But you're not supposed to have this conversation. You're not supposed to speak about this. That's why this channel gets shadow banned. It's why we got suspended. It's why they have been fighting us for months now to not be able to speak, because we are citing actual news events and we are showing you links for these things. Jason mentions, oh, sounds like someone's at my door, but they will have to wait. Jason mentions more people will go out and vote if they are confident that the sticky notes will stick. And I think it's true. The confidence that we have to identify is not the feelings of individuals like the Texas Democrats, as I have shown you from Congress, is it should be the facts saying, hey, we should be celebrating the fact that in Texas, 75% of blacks are registered to vote. 72% of whites are registered to vote. That 65% of whites and 64% of blacks are out and voted. We should be celebrating that. We should be celebrating the fact and announcing to the people, hey, Texas ranks number 10 in the nation for blacks who are voting and are registered to vote. We should be celebrating that. That should be a positive, not a negative. It shouldn't be something where we see Texas Democrats running away from their jobs, even though they're getting paid, and complaining in D.C. for something that doesn't exist. I mean, that should be the way it is. Maybe I'm mistaken about that, but I think I would be more encouraged to vote to know that 75% of black people are going out and vote. Why shouldn't I go out and vote too? That 64% of them are showing up in elections to vote, with 65% of whites showing up to vote. You know what? My vote is as good as anyone else's vote. I have just as much of a chance to affect and change elections. I should go out there and vote. And I know that I'm in the right state, that I'm able to do that because my state is ranked number 10 out of 50 states. So therefore, I should be happy to go out there and do this. Shouldn't we be saying that instead of hearing the Texas Democrats go, well, I don't think it's that much. I don't think there's that many people. I think it's really low, and they're completely wrong at every single statement that they're made. Every single statement they made is completely wrong. Completely wrong. And they're not being called out by the major news media or the internet overlords for lying and misinforming the public as they are. Because it is misinformation when the Texas Democrats Ms. Johnson in particular, as I showed you in the video, and I'm happy to show it again if YouTube would want me to, where she is misinforming the people, saying, oh, I think it's about 44%. No, it's actually 72. Oh, I don't think there's really anybody who's going out and voting. Oh, yeah, it's 64%, 1% less than whites. When she's misinforming the public and her constituents, I didn't see YouTube say, we got to cut that off. When Joe Biden said that if you've gotten a vaccine, you won't go into an ICU and you won't die from Delta variant, that's not true. When Joe Biden said that the Second Amendment has always limited people from being able to own certain types of firearms, and that is a fact. Even PolitiFact had to call it out and say, that is not true. That has always been a lie. Gee, I didn't see YouTube, Facebook, and the internet overlords come out and say, well, we have to ban Joe Biden now because he factually lied. It is a factual misrepresentation. He misinformed and disinformed the public. I didn't see them come out and try and ban him for that. I didn't see them attack him for that or somehow punish the White House for that. And I have to ask you folks, you heard Joe Biden say that. Did you hear anyone say, besides this channel, did you hear someone say, well, that's not true? That's factually incorrect. Did you hear CNBC, MSNBC, CNN? Did they come out and go, well, that's not true? That's factually absolutely incorrect. And there is way too much history and evidence to show that. Did you hear Facebook and YouTube go put up a little marker on your websites and say, hey, this is misleading and incorrect information? Please go to our fact check to find out that that historically, up until 1934, you could own any firearm that you wanted to in the United States. You could own a cannon. You could own a machine gun. You could own anything. You could own a tank up until 1934 when the National Firearms Act was passed. And at that time, it still didn't stop you from being able to own these things. You had to get a special license for them. And that's why more than 700,000 people in America at this moment own machine guns. That is a fact, proven by the ATF as of January 2021. And I've shown that on this show already. Would YouTube like to check that? Let's go with a fact check on that. I will show you the ATF source as we have done on this channel before. But they don't want you to know the facts. They want you to know the feeling. They want you to think that you can't own these things. They want you to think that they are deadly, and that is not true. Let me go back to the comments. And again, folks, if you disagree with me, I am more than happy to hear anyone's argument. You can call into the show at 607-242-1582. You can leave a comment. I am more than happy to hear someone say, Mike, you're not correct. Let's see the truth. I am more than happy to have that conversation. If you think the sources, the ATF, everything I'm talking about, New York Times, I'm almost exclusively looking at either the federal government or left-leaning sources to prove everything I am talking about. And if you think I'm wrong, I'm more than happy to go over it. If you think those sources are bad, I'm more than happy to go over it. Dee mentions that just recently on Washington Examiner, Biden is going to misappropriate more taxpayer money to lawyers and the border for illegals. That money is being misappropriated. I believe I would not be surprised that money is disappearing and being misappropriated when it comes to anything with our southern border. I think it's incredible. I mean, it's costing us $2 billion to stop building the wall. That has been reported, and I believe it was reported by the Washington Post, if I am correct, approximately 3 weeks ago. So it's costing us money to actually try and stop building the wall because the Biden administration apparently wants us to be an open society to let anyone into the nation. That's why we have video evidence consistently of people being bussed into our nation, being allowed over the border, being sent across the nation. And that's why the Biden administration is factually, as we have seen in Tennessee, that they are literally, this was April of Tennessee, they are literally taking people, in particular children, from the southern border, and they are shipping them out in the middle of the night to different parts of our nation. That is a fact. We have shown you the evidence of that from Tennessee in the reporting that has been happening. So I wouldn't be surprised if money is being misappropriated, although I don't know that exact article that you're speaking about, D. Hot Chicks mentions that their channel has been shadow banned since its inception. Mike Bowie mentions that they're not illegal aliens now, they are non-citizens under the Biden administration's point of view. And Biden can have any point of view he wants to have. The fact is, by law, they are illegal aliens. That is the proper terminology for them. The news media likes to use other wording. They want to soften it. They want to change the way you feel about it. Because if you said they are illegal aliens, you may think they are criminals, which is a fact, because they have broken our law willfully. And they continue to evade persecution of the law, properly being prosecuted by the law. They are willfully avoiding that. And so it's absolutely true. And they don't want you to know that. That's why they call them undocumented, because they lack any documentation that would legally authorize them to be in the United States. They're migrants. They're not migrants. They're invaders, quite honestly, because that's what you do when you enter a nation, a sovereign nation, against the laws and will of that nation. That's an invasion. That's like someone coming into your home. It's called a home invasion. When someone breaks into your house, no matter what they're trying to do in your house, they have broken in. They have invaded your home. That's why we call it home invasions. And just like when someone invades your home, if they invade our nation, that is a crime. That makes them a criminal. And so Joe Biden may think it's fantastic, but I got an idea. Let's try and break into Joe Biden's house or Hunter Biden's house. And I guarantee you they will consider that a crime. But it's perfectly okay for them to come into New York State, into the United States. That's not a crime. Same principle. There is no difference. They're picking and choosing laws. Now, if you want to tell me, Mike, you don't understand, this is okay, we should have an open policy, please, I will be happy to have that conversation with anyone who would like to. If you disagree with me, if you think that, oh no, open borders should exist, and the United States is the leader in that, hey, let's have that conversation, because I can point out another 150 nations around the world that have closed borders, including the favorite of the left, Bernie Sanders and others, the misrepresentation of the Nordic countries like Sweden and the Netherlands and Switzerland, and saying that they are perfectly socialist states, which they deny. That is not true. And guess what? You try and enter Switzerland, you try and enter Sweden without being invited in as an illegal alien, and watch how quickly you're going to be kicked out of that country, if not after being arrested, and you will not become a citizen of those nations, because they explicitly make it almost impossible to become a citizen of Switzerland, Sweden, Netherlands, and many other nations. They don't want you there. So if they want to point to them and say, well, we should be more like them, guess what? If we're more like Sweden and Switzerland, then we would have even harsher penalties for people trying to become United States citizens or coming into our nation. That is a fact. They're cherry picking the parts they like to tell you about without noticing the rest. And if anyone disputes me on that, I will be happy to go and look up the laws of immigration in Switzerland, in Sweden, which I have done in the past, and I will be happy to show you where they absolutely restrict and make it almost impossible for someone to become a citizen of those states, of those countries. But the news media doesn't tell you that. And mentions that what was the stated purpose of the $15,000 payment to illegal aliens in New York? It's absurd regardless of the reason, but I'm just curious. It's a good question. If you didn't hear me mention it, Ann, or if I went through it too quickly, I apologize. The $15,000 payment was a stimulus payment to illegal aliens to make up for the fact that they were not able to get the stimulus payments from the federal government like the American citizens did, nor were they able to get the $300 extra payment that people on unemployment have been able to get since the start of the COVID lockdowns. So since the lockdown, since Americans were getting bonus checks, including $1,000 a week at one point, and $300 a week since that point, which I believe was since August of 2020, to make up for that, because the illegals were being considered, or they felt like they were being treated like second-class citizens, which is not true, because they weren't treated like second-class citizens. They were treated like criminals because they broke the law. You may not, progressives may not like that, but that is the fact. They were treated like criminals because they are criminals. But in New York State and also in California, the liberal socialist leaning elements of the Democratic Party said, well, that's not fair. We like illegal aliens. We want illegal aliens in our states, and we want them to vote, which they can do in California, in some of the cities in California. I believe it's San Francisco. They can vote. So what they decided to do is said, hey, we're going to give them $15,000 one-time lump sum paid for by American citizens given to illegal aliens to make up for the fact that they missed all those other checks that were being sent out to Americans. That, Ann, is exactly the context, and that is exactly why they did it. And that was done by executive mandate by Emperor Cuomo through his use of executive power. And it was also approved by the state assembly and state senate, which are under Democratic control. That is a fact. I'm happy to go back and show you the evidence of that. We've covered it on this channel before. Major public may not know about this much, as you didn't, Ann, because news media didn't like talking about it, but that's what's happening. And that's part of the reason why your dollar, what you get paid, is worth less, because it is inflationary. We didn't have that money. New York State is in debt, $6 billion. And they just spent another, I believe it was another $500,000, or between $1 billion and half a billion dollars was spent on these illegal aliens, giving them $15,000. That's money that could have gone to you or to someone that you know who needs help, like say for their evictions. They need help with that. Well, that money went to illegal aliens instead. Dee mentions that absolutely one old saying is, it only takes one man to make a change. Well, if you believe in Martin Luther King, if you believe in Gandhi, Malcolm X, Mother Teresa, yeah, it's true. It also is true with President Obama and Joe Biden. Yeah, they're making lots of changes, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's good. It can be good, but it doesn't mean it is. Now, I'm not saying that you have to agree with everything that I say. And I am only one man. So is Dave Rubin. So is Roman on Epic Times. There's a lot of one person. You yourself are one person. You make a difference. Just by liking this, by sharing this, by subscribing, you're able to make a difference, because it expands the ability of American citizens to learn information you may not know about and to add your voice, whether you agree or disagree. And if people notice, I constantly encourage people, if you disagree, speak up. If you think I've missed something, speak up. Because America is made better when we have bigger conversations where more people are involved, not when we have a small group of elites like the internet overlords, like the socialist Democrats, who are in charge of our country, who are in charge of our social media, and they get to dictate what can and cannot be said. And they chill and threaten our news media, like the New York Post, which was shut down because they dared to say Hunter Biden had a laptop that showed evidence of his corruption and the corruption of the Biden administration. And they shut it down only for 4 months later to tell us, well, in fact, it does exist, that the evidence is there, and there is an investigation that was going on about that. That's called manipulation, both emotional and otherwise. to manipulate and trying to promote a political agenda. It's worse than propaganda. It really is. Let me continue with the comments. Jason mentions they only ban you if they feel what you say makes others feel unsafe. Removing your guns makes them feel better. The word illegal makes people feel unsafe. Well, first of all, the word illegal has no context with feelings whatsoever. No one should feel, and see, that's the problem with the news media and social media and memes today. They're trying to invoke an emotion in you. The word illegal has nothing to do with, there is no connotation of feeling in that. It is a fact. Facts don't have feelings. They are. So, and that's the problem. Social media, the Democratic progressives, they're out there, they're trying to make you feel a certain way about facts. Rather than focusing on the fact itself, they want you to feel about that fact. And the feeling is what they want you to be emphasizing. Who cares? You can like the fact that illegal aliens are criminals, or you can be upset that illegal aliens are criminals, but the fact is they are criminals. They have actually factually broken the law. The feeling has nothing to do with it. The feeling is immaterial. And to tell people, as social media, internet overlords like to do, that, well, that makes people feel unsafe. That's your personal prerogative. That is something that you get to choose. And they're pushing it and they're trying to convince you that you should feel unsafe. Well, that's a manipulation of your emotions. It has nothing to do with the actual facts that exist. And we need to recognize that they are manipulating you emotionally so you don't think logically, because if you thought logically, the nation would be in a better place because we could actually figure out better answers to the problem rather than running around with our feelings all over the place and getting nothing accomplished. That's why we have such an ineffective government at this moment, whether it's at the state, local, or federal level. Our governments are highly inefficient because we have a large group of individuals that are generally socialists and progressives who are running around telling people, oh, this is how I feel. We have to make laws based on my feelings. We have to enforce laws based on my feelings, which has nothing to do with the facts that are at hand. And whether we make them feel better or not doesn't mean that we've improved the system, and whether or not laws are better. And I'll point to the reform, bail reform. It makes a progressive feel a lot better to have bail reform, to let people who have committed crimes to be let loose with a promise to show up back in court. And what we've seen is that the result of that has been an increase in the amount of violent crimes and most crimes overall, but violent crimes in particular, in every single state that has allowed the bail reform and releasing people without when they have a crime, and or all these prosecutors like the New York prosecutors that eliminated 3,000, literally 3,000 people who were arrested over the summer of 2020, the second half of 2020. They just eliminated 3,000 different charges of disturbing the peace, rioting in the first, second degree, all these crimes. They released these people. They just eliminated these charges. Has that helped New York State? No. New York State has, what is it? We're up about 40% in homicides. We have even higher rates of gun violence and violence overall in this state because we're prosecuting less and less people. We're letting more and more of the criminals right out to repeat offend. How many times have we seen in the news, even though it wasn't popularized, how many times have we seen in the news where an individual has gone, they get arrested, they turned around, and they went back out and committed a crime? It was in New York State, I believe it was in January. I'm quoting off my memory here, please don't hold me to this date exactly, but an individual was arrested in New York State for a bank robbery. He was released the same day, turned around, and went back and robbed the same bank again because of bail reform. That's got to terrify you. Let me get back to some of the comments here. And I see you, Garth. I'm going to get right to you. I see you, Tina. I'm going to get to you too. So Dean mentions one of the things I was mentioning earlier was Oregon, Columbia County. Jason says that uninvited guests is a safe word. I like that. I wish we could use that. Uninvited guests, safe word, get rid of all the illegal aliens. I wish it was that easy. D mentions that Biden, talking about Biden's funding and the funds going to the southern border, they were indicating that it's misappropriated because it's a broken current immigration laws. So many taxpayers' money to assist it. Therefore, logically, the money is being misappropriated because they're taking taxes from you and me to spend it badly on what's going on at the southern border, like the fact that it's costing us an extra $2 billion to stop building the wall, which is ridiculous. And you think, you stopped the work. Why is it costing $2 billion more to stop working at the southern border? That's just insane. And why do we have to pay for that? It's cheaper to actually build the wall than to stop because they're costing us an extra $2 billion. It's insane. Tina mentions criminal is the best word suited for illegal aliens, and they are criminals, and it is a fact. Garth, hello. It is good to see you. I know this first time you're I believe it may be the first or second time you're on the channel. Garth says, I still believe in immigration, gun control, and the media are all smoke. Although these things are all freedoms we want to protect, here we go bombing Syria again. And I have a problem with that. As we have said, Garth, on this channel, you can go back to January 22nd. We were one of the first news media mentioning the fact that in Syria, that Joe Biden had sent in more American troops into Syria, and that was escalating our problems in the Middle East. We have constantly been talking about the fact that the Biden administration has been empowering Iran, which is destabilizing the Middle East, that it is making it much more dangerous. So I agree with you. Now, I believe in immigration. We've never said immigration's bad. Legal immigration, there is the difference right there. Legal immigration is a great thing, and we believe in that. And maybe we should expand that. That's perfectly fine. But illegal immigration is a crime, and we have to watch out because the news media likes to mix those two things together. Social media, the internet overlords like to mix it together and say, well, we're talking about immigration. Well, no, we're talking about illegal immigration, or we're talking about legal immigration. They are not the same thing, which is why I always like to emphasize illegal, because it is not the same thing. I do believe in immigration. I do believe in the 20 million people, 2 million people who are online at this moment to get into the United States. Some of them have waited 2 decades to get to the United States to become part of the United States. I'm absolutely for those people. God bless them. They want to become Americans. They believe in America. I remember my interview with Lily Tang Williams. You can look that up. Lily, Lily Tang Williams, who is an immigrant into the United States, a naturalized citizen now from China. She was born and raised under communist China and Chairman Mao. And she is one of the biggest advocates I have ever seen for the Second Amendment and the Constitution. And of all the people that I've done interviews with, I have seen very few people who are as passionate as Lily Tang Williams for the United States and our Constitution. And she is a naturalized citizen. She came and immigrated to the United States legally because she loves our country and she loves freedom. I would love to have 1 million more people like Lily Tang Williams. I am not interested in the 1 million, almost 1 million people who have crossed our border since Joe Biden took power on January 20th. And yes, there are at least 700,000 people with at least 50,000 children who have been abused by being sent 1,000 miles on their own with strangers. Many of them, God knows how many of them, have been grabbed up by sex slavery gangs, by drug dealers and drug cartels. We don't even know how many of these kids didn't make it into the United States. We do know that more than 40,000 wound up by themselves in the United States, praying that the United States would take care of them. That is child abuse, period. point blank. You try and send your kid from whatever city you're in America right now to another city in America, anywhere in America, as an American citizen, you will be arrested for child abuse. That kid has no money, no food, no clothing, besides the clothing on their back, and you just say, go over to that other city, see what happens. I guarantee you, you're being arrested for child abuse. Someone does that from El Salvador and sends their kid into the United States with nothing except the clothes on their back, surrounded by sex slavery gangs and drug cartels, and they may or may not make it to be found in our desert one day. You know what? That's considered, oh, well, that's perfectly fine. Oh, no, that's all right. We're going to take care of the kid. Why are we, Kamala Harris can't figure out how to get to the root of the problem? How about we start off with Kamala Harris, you're supposed to be in charge of immigration in the United States, although no one's heard her say anything actually intelligent about this. How about this? Go on international news and say, stop abusing your children. This is a crime against children. And the world does not want you to punish and abuse your children. Stop sending them by themselves on 1,000-mile treks or more, surrounded by sex slavers and drug cartels. Don't do that to your kids. You're abusing them. Not only will we send that child back to you, but when they get back, we're going to punish you. We're going to seek out crimes in your nation for abusing your own children. Say that and actually follow it up with a couple thousand actual charges, international charges against these parents for abusing their children this way. I guarantee you, if you do that, you will see a drop in the number of at least these unaccompanied children at our southern border. There's an idea. Now, you can tell me if you think I'm right or wrong. Am I being abusive here in saying that maybe we should take care of our kids and take care of other countries' kids by saying, don't abuse them this way? Because I can tell you right now, it's a better idea than anything Kamala Harris has said, and she really hasn't said a bloody thing yet. So D mentions, let me go back because I'm getting behind on comments, and there are some other things I want to get to. There's a whole bunch of stuff. But I do want to speak about all this with you. D mentions, she says, amen, you just said that what I was going to say, feelings don't matter here, facts matter. Facts are the only thing that should matter in our politics, in the laws of our nation, because feelings don't matter. It doesn't matter how you feel about the law. You may not like jaywalking. It's a law for a reason. You may not like bank robbery as being a law, that you can't rob a bank and just take money, but there's a reason for it. There's a reason why embezzlement is a crime. There is a reason why lying on documents is perjury. There are reasons for this. You may not like them, but they are there for a reason, factually. It doesn't matter how you feel about it. You don't get to rob your neighbor and mug somebody even though you want their money. You may feel like you should have their money, that you should take what they have. You may believe in redistributing their wealth actively, but that's still a crime. Active redistribution of wealth, which is otherwise known as robbery, is a crime. You may not like it being a crime. You may want to aggressively redistribute someone's wealth, but that doesn't make it legal. I mean, there you go. It's as simple as that. Even though we hear from the Democratic Socialists, especially the Democratic Socialists of America and the Ithaca chapter, where they say, no, it's perfectly fine. We aggressively believe in denying people the right to free speech, as the Ithaca chapter of Democratic Socialists of America have done. As they have reported in Ithaca, as they have spoken to Ithaca News, and they have said that they have been willing and they willfully went out and physically attacked American citizens for those American citizens daring to express a political opinion. That people were out and they were peacefully protesting and they were peacefully sharing their views, and the Democratic Socialists of America, the Ithaca chapter, decided that they had to physically attack those peaceful protesters so that they could silence them because they didn't like what they were saying. See, that's what feelings get you. feelings says, oh, I should attack them because I don't like what they have to say. That's illegal. That is a crime. And we should never allow that. We should never support that. And yet, prosecutors said, oh, it's a perfectly fine. That's no crime. We're going to let it go. Because the internet overlords, the Democrats in New York State's government, they are okay with that. I guarantee you, if it were a bunch of Republicans or conservatives or even libertarians who are doing the same thing, we'd all be in jail. In fact, there's lots of evidence that that exactly would happen to you. In fact, we can look at what happened on January 6th. A bunch of conservatives and Republicans did exactly what we have seen the liberals do in, 22 cities around the nation? Portland, Seattle, New York, Austin, Boulder, Kenosha. We saw them create all kinds of riots, burn down buildings, kill people, create autonomous zones that are absolutely treasonous by definition, as we have gone over in the show before, because they violate every single law at the local, state, and federal level. And when a bunch of Republicans just barely did, and by the way, also a bunch of Democrats, which were at the same event on January 6th, which we have evidence of. It has been proven. In fact, there are checks from MSNBC to the individuals who are known members of Antifa, who are at the event, who broke windows, who encouraged people to commit violence. We saw that when we see these American citizens that did the very least to imitate the far left, there has been, what do we see now? Constant comments about insurrection, that these people are criminal, and we have to, because they are all being charged with breaking and entering, we have to throw them in jail for 3 or 4 months at a time. But we're not going to prosecute a single person who has done an autonomous zone in the United States throughout all of 2020. Not one. Please show me where you see people. There's been 5 people that were arrested, one for having a flamethrower, one for actually killing someone in Seattle. I think there was 5 in total. 5 in total that I can recall off the top of my head. And how many other people from the autonomous zones were let go? Thousands? No crime. It doesn't matter. You held the American citizens hostage. You violated all the laws of the United States at every level of government. You denied people the ability to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Absolutely no problem. That's okay. A couple of people walk around in the halls of government and not killing anyone, barely any property destroyed, and we're losing our minds. Please tell me. Does that make sense to you? Does it not seem like the proportions are off? That this is somehow skewed? Because they were doing exactly what we saw the left do and what the left has proposed, because that's what BLM proposes. They want to destroy our nation. They have said that they want to see the United States as a socialist government. They want to introduce communism. That is what Patrice Cullors, the founder of BLM, has said publicly on international media. I mean, she's a horrible communist, by the way, because she owns 5 houses just for her privately. She's a horrible communist, but yet she wants to turn America into a communist nation and destroy everything. And yet we're pissed off with the media and the internet overlords. They're pissed off with Republicans and conservatives and the Democrats who were at January 6th. Doesn't make sense. Does not make sense. Garth mentions we need a 2-way system, one for true refugees and one for people who have science or skills to bring a ratio into the system. Actually, Garth, that already exists. Garth, there is the H-1B visas that exist, which is there to bring in individuals with specific skills that the United States needs. In particular, that is usually targeted towards individuals working in STEM fields, mostly into computer-related fields. That exists already. In fact, they've been attempting and have been expanding that since 2014 when I first started speaking about it. It is the H-1B visa system. It is a problem. There are a lot of inherent problems in that. So that exists. And there is a separate refugee system that exists. And it already has existed. And refugees are allowed into the United States normally after an 18-month, sometimes depending on the nation, it can take 18 months to 2 years for an individual who is in the refugee pipeline to be allowed into the United States as their background is checked to make sure that they are not a terrorist infiltrator or some other non-desirable to be allowed into the United States. A non-desirable being some kind of criminal or a repeat criminal offender or a member of a terrorist organization. That's why it takes 18 months, because we have to ask these countries, who is this person? They say their name is Joe Smith. Is this actually Joe Smith? And does Joe Smith have any crimes? Has he committed rape? Has he committed robbery? Is he a terrorist? What do you know about Joe Smith? And we wait for those countries to respond back to us. And then if that person has been proven to be who they say they are, and they have no apparent laws having been broken, we allow them to enter the United States. And roughly 50 to 100,000 refugees, depending on the year in the administration, actually are allowed into the United States. So we do fast track that, because we're doing that right now for Afghanistan, any kind of the interpreters and the families of interpreters and those Afghani people who have worked with the United States government. There is roughly 50,000 of them who are appealing for asylum in the United States. We expect to accept 20,000 of those individuals at this moment and their families. That's separate. It's 20,000 people and their families, which I believe brings it up to 50,000 in total. And we are accepting them into the United States in a quicker process, because as the United States under the Biden administration runs with its tail between its legs out of Afghanistan, just as we did in Bagram Airport, which I have shown you the evidence of when it happened, when we ran away, turning out the lights in the middle of the night and just running away, leaving tanks and small arms and ammunition and food for the Taliban to come in and take, then these Afghanis are terrified that they're going to be beheaded. And so they're being accepted into the United States at a higher, faster rate. So we do, in fact, have those two different systems, and illegal aliens do not qualify under either of those problems, and therefore they don't deserve any kind of special recognition. I went over that with a little bit of depth because most people, like yourself, Garth, do not know about these things, that they exist. They already exist. Democrats are saying, we've got to create these programs. They already exist. We're just not using them. And Democrats don't want to tell the public that they already exist. And that, again, that's part of the misinformation coming from the left that YouTube, Facebook, the internet overlords don't mind telling people. And if someone disagrees with me on that, I am more than happy for them to call into the show, 607-242-1582, and we will be happy to go over that with you and show you all evidence of this information, because it is a fact. It is not my opinion. These are facts. Let me continue again. D mentions that there's no support for Chicago Police Department. Antifa hacked their communications. That's one of the problems that we've seen. And again, this is the excuse that we've seen. And this is why we see so many cities. What is it? It's about 22 major cities across the United States. Coincidentally, every single one of them being Democratic strongholds that have been under Democratic control for at least 30 years, if not longer. They're the ones that are experiencing these insane spikes in crime and violent crime and gun crime. And it just so happens that they're the same exact cities that have sanctuary cities, that have sanctuary states, that have bail reform and are releasing criminals with the hope that they will show back up. And they also tend to have the highest numbers of illegal aliens entering their states. It's amazing a coincidence. I can't tell you that it's a fact that they are enhancing and encouraging people to do these things, but there is a correlation that the 22 cities where we saw the Antifa autonomous zones attempted, where we're seeing the biggest riots based on Antifa and the progressive left, with the largest populations of the Democratic Socialists, which is a splinter of the Democratic Party, these progressive groups, that they also have the highest crime, the lowest number of police. They're trying to defund the police departments. They have the highest amounts of debt in the nation, and that they're basically turning into hellholes, every single one of them. It's just an interesting coincidence. I can't tell you one leads to the other. There is no scientific evidence of that at this moment, but I can show you consistently every single one of those 22 cities, which includes Seattle, Portland, New York State, Chicago, LA, Arizona, Austin, several others. We can keep going. That's every single one of them. I can't prove that one leads to the other, but it just seems really coincidental that you release criminals without charging them for crimes. They go out and they try and violate every law in the nation treasonously, that they go out and they have high proportions of illegal aliens that are getting funded by taxpayers, like the $15,000 payment here in New York State, that somehow that leads to crime. Just seems to happen. Can't say it's a fact. I can just tell you that's the coincidence that we see there consistently in every single one of those cities. Every single one. It's just interesting. Mavis mentions a Viking man seemed like a big threat to our country. Okay. I'm trying to catch up in notes here. Give me a second, folks. Yeah, when they fight for communism, they're labeled as freedom fighters. I find it interesting. Hey, Jason, everybody, I have a real interesting question for you. What do you call it when you have people who are in a communist government and they're protesting and fighting against that communist government? Because I know that when the left, when they're fighting for communism, they call themselves freedom fighters. You know, when you see Antifa, they call themselves freedom fighters. When you see the progressive leaders of tomorrow and the far left, when they commit these crimes, they call themselves freedom fighters. But when you see people in Cuba, the people in Cuba, the public of Cuba, who are fighting against the communists in Cuba, then we see those very same, well, Bernie Sanders, a self-avowed communist, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who is a democratic socialist, one of the leaders of the democratic socialist movement in America, they call those people misguided, and they say, well, the communist government is great. So I wonder, what do you call a person fighting for freedom in a communist nation? Because I know they call Antifa freedom fighters. It just seems interesting. It's a good question. Garth, I answered your question. D mentions over 500 conservatives, actually 600 conservatives that are in jail from January 6th. And there are reports, including from America First organization, who have alleged that several people are being abused in the DC jail where they're being held. Many of these people are being held for breaking and entering, and they've been held without court dates for 4 months now. So that's a terrifying thing. That's from what I understand about it. It's terrifying. BLM, D mentions BLM is Obama's commie army. That is an interesting point of view on that. I would say Antifa, absolutely. BLM in general. Hot Chicks mentions socialism is racism, and I believe it. And we see that example all the time. Vic mentions he's replying to Greg, so I'm going to go past that. D mentions that Judicial Watch just now sending video about CDC colluding with Facebook. Well, we know for a fact from the White House itself that they have already admitted that the federal government, per the executive, is working with Facebook and the internet overlords to punish American citizens for having an opinion. That is a problem. Because it is American. Whether you agree with it or not, it is your right to disagree with the government and to have your own personal viewpoint on your own personal health care. I'm not telling you what to choose. You can choose whatever you want. But I can tell you, it is your right exclusively to be able to determine your own private health care. The government has nothing to say about that. The government, the federal government, doesn't know what your health care is. They don't know how to take care of you because the federal government doesn't care about you as an individual. They only look at things as large groups of people, like the Democrats do. You're a category, you're a check mark. So there should be no interference, I believe, with the federal government trying to get involved in your personal private health care. Because what is good for you as a personal private individual has nothing to do with me as a personal private individual. The federal government should not be in that process. It's one thing for the CDC to say, we think this is a great guideline. It's another thing for the federal government to say, where's your passport if you don't have a vaccine passport, which we've been talking about since December of 2020, to say, oh, you don't have a passport, so you don't get to go to work, and you have to be treated like some kind of criminal for making a decision about your private health, which may be getting a vaccine could be a violation of your health. It could be a religious thing. It could be a lot of things. Now, you get to make that choice yourself. I don't know, and I am not advocating one way or the other. I am not a doctor. But I can tell you, I think it's wrong for the federal government to mandate individual, the actions of individual lives, where they get to micromanage your life on any aspect. I think that's wrong. And I am more than happy to hear from anyone on the left to tell me why the government should micromanage an individual's life. I am more than happy to hear from Antifa, Progressive Leaders of Tomorrow, Citizen Action, Indivisible New York, or any of its other associates, the Democratic Party, the DNC, any of their operatives, any of their elected officials, any of their candidates. I am more than happy to have a conversation with any one of them right now or at any time in the future to try and explain why the federal government should micromanage any individual's life. Please, I want to have that conversation. I would like to understand why the government needs to be involved in my or your individual life. Because we are the example for the entire rest of the world. Hong Kong, the people who disappeared because the communist government doesn't like them, they don't like the fact that the Hong Kong City Council was trying to become more democratic because they were singing the national anthem of the United States, holding up a United States flag. They made those people disappear. And I'm trying to understand why the United States wants to be more like communist China and micromanage individuals' lives than being more like what the Hong Kong people want and believe America is, which is individual freedom. Please explain that to me. Please explain that to you. And if the internet overlords don't agree, I want to hear them explain why. If they think I can't say that, I can prove, and I can show you the evidence, both video and written articles by major news media showing how the Hong Kong government has been disappeared and how communists are invading and controlling the individual lives of citizens of China, and how the United States is copying that. I can show them evidence of all of that if they want to go there, because they will likely want to strike down this channel and make it disappear because I have dared to mention it. If YouTube has a question about whether or not people are allowed in the United States, whether the people on January 6th, 600 people have been arrested, that is a fact. I'm happy to show the evidence of that. Mavis, by the way, Mavis, thank you for being on the show. I always enjoy it when everyone's here speaking. I know that one of the comments you made was sarcastic. I understand, but I'm also looking at what YouTube is looking at, what the internet overlords are looking at, trying to address that. And I want to thank all the people who are watching the show for the first time. If you are finding this to be interesting, whether you agree or not, if you have found it to be interesting and informative, please do like, share, most of all subscribe so that we can spread this. And again, I am welcoming and offering. We're never here to beat up on anyone. Even if you have a different opinion of us, we're happy to hear your voice. We would not pick on you for that. We want to hear this. We want to have that conversation. Vic mentions that he's tired of the division in the country. There is only one race, and that's the human race. So when BLM states, that racism is no states there of racism, it's no different than when the KKK screams white supremacy. Black supremacy, white supremacy, Hispanic supremacy, female supremacy, male supremacy. I don't care what form of supremacy it may be. Anyone who is saying that is a problem. Anyone who is advocating, and see, that's one of the core problems of intersectionality, critical race theory, gender identity politics. It assumes, by its definition, that there are people who are preferred and above everyone else. So whether it's white people have guilt because they are superior and blacks and everyone else are inferior, by definition, you don't have guilt because you're equal to someone. They have guilt because they are assuming that whites are better and whites have more. That is the assumption that is being made under critical race theory by intersectionality. And if you assume that, then you are also assuming that other people are inferior. The people who support critical race theory support the idea that blacks and Hispanics and minorities are inferior and incapable of being able to take care of themselves. That's why they need the full power of the government to step in and to push them forward and to take care of them. And that's insulting, and I disagree with it. You don't have to agree with me, but I think it's very clear. I think it's very clear. So, Vic, I thank you for that comment. Vic also goes on to mention Ben Franklin once wrote, quote, once citizens figure out how to deplete the coffers of government, that government would fail. I believe it's true, yeah. I'm sure, and Jason mentions YouTube, robots and Democrats can sense sarcasm, no doubt. Mavis mentions the socialists want less freedom because they think because they think it's worth less freedom for others. They think the rules will be against others and that they're going to benefit, that the rules won't apply to them. And that's sad because in every single socialist and communist government in the world, in the history of the world, it has always been that the socialists, whoever's in charge of those socialist communist governments, always turn against their own people, and the average person is always being subjugated and punished. And whether or not you happen to be a loyal party member, you get to go to a gulag too. We've seen it in every single socialist nation. Books have been written about it over and over again. We've seen it in China, in Russia, Venezuela, Cuba. Name a socialist country, it has always happened. Every single time. That is a fact. So they may think that they are part of the in crowd. It is almost never true. They're more likely to be punished by the actual inner ruling crowd. That's just a fact. All right. So I've been talking about a lot of things. I need to touch on a few other things that have happened in the week while we were being suppressed by YouTube because they didn't want to have this conversation that you're having with me right now. Dee, Mavis, Vic, Jason, they didn't want us to have any of these conversations. They wanted us to be silent. Let's find out why. What is it they were afraid of that happened in the last week? Well, how about this headline from the New York Post? In the New York Post, we see that it's insanity that there are, just look at the headline yourself. 161 million people who have been vaccinated, 5,601 people who have caught a breakthrough COVID and were hospitalized. 1,141 of them have died. 0.0007%. And we are panicking. Our nation is panicking because of this. That is absolutely insane, which makes you have to wonder the question, I don't need to justify my refusal. You need to prove your right to force me, which is a very important thought. Again, why should the government micromanage our lives? because they said there's an epidemic, that there's a problem. There is always an epidemic. There is always a problem. There is always a scandal in the world. There is always a threat against the United States. At this very moment, and since 1980, we have seen that Iran has promised and has been dedicated to the idea that they are going to destroy the United States. They want to kill everyone in the United States. Iran and all the Ayatollahs have said that they want to destroy America is the great devil and they want to get rid of us. Whether you're a Democrat or socialist or anyone else, they want to wipe you off the face of the earth because women get to have jobs, because women get to go to school, because women get to be able to vote. They don't like that. That doesn't match their form of Islam, and therefore you are evil and you need to be removed. And if you're gay, Iran will kill you. That is a fact. That is a fact. So whether or not you think America is great or not, Iran is a threat to the United States. By definition, by their government, by the way they view their religion, they want to destroy America. And so, but yet we see, and this is the thing, that our government is saying, well, you really can't say that. You can't do that. We need to micromanage. See, the problem is you're saying this. Not that we see the Biden administration right now is trying to work with the Iran government to get the Iran nuclear deal, even though Iran is telling us for a fact that, well, no, there's a problem, that they want to kill us, that they want to see us dead. That's Iran saying that. It has nothing to do with the United States. Iran is saying that they want to kill us all. And yet, the United States government under the Biden administration is happy to give them more money so that they can commit more global terror to kill everyone. That is a fact. We can prove that. That is part of the negotiations that are ongoing right now, according to the Iranian government under former Prime Minister Rouhani and under the new Minister Riazi, I believe is the pronunciation of his name, that this is what they're negotiating. They want the United States to release all the economic sanctions so that they can commit more global terror, and the United States wants a promise, please don't make a nuke. That's it. That's the exchange.